It's an amazing thing. Do I have to I'm going to bring up the tweet because not often does it happen any longer that Nate Brody and I agree. And today is one of those days. Nate Brody put up a tweet earlier today as relates to the Scott Adams dismissal with prejudice of those charges that were brought by the Biden DOJ after a 3-year investigation brought in September 2024. What was happening in November 2024? Oh yeah, okay. Brought in September 2024 after a 3-year investigation, almost like they were sitting on those charges in their back pocket, waiting to file them to compel compliance or to punish for political dissent. They brought those charges against Eric Adams. They then lose the election. Trump comes in and he didn't pardon Eric Adams, which was irritating as relates to how the markets viewed that dismissal without prejudice. But he dismissed the charges without prejudice and said, we'll revisit it in 9 months after the mayoral election has occurred in New York City. And people were crying foul. This is Trump trying to hold these charges like the sword of Damocles over Eric Adams' head. I was saying, yeah, I could see that. But if you see that, then you should have seen the original charges as the Biden administration trying to hold these charges over Eric Adams' head like a sword of Damocles. But people don't seem to, reflect inwards the way they project outwards. Nate, the lawyer, earlier today, and it's almost like a needling tweet. It's like a incendiary tweet. And if you don't know Nate, everybody knows Nate, and I don't care if you disagree with his politics. I like Nate as a human, and that's what matters. Nate, the lawyer, says some lawyers claimed it was fine to use baseless fake charges to coerce New York City's mayor into working with Trump. It was wrong, unethical, and corrupt. A judge just dismissed those charges with prejudice. It's disheartening that some abandon their own morals just to pander to their audience's desires. Now, I read that. It's a little accusatory. I'm not defensive. I was like, first of all, at the first part of it, I thought he was talking about the baseless fake charges to coerce New York City's mayor to work with Biden. That's where I thought he was going with it till I saw the word Trump. And I said, I actually agree with this decision, but it's very interesting to see a Biden-appointed judge dismissing charges brought under the Biden admin, which were probably brought for the exact same reason the judge is now dismissing them with prejudice, because the Biden admin was using these charges to coerce political compliance from Eric Adams. It's a double-fakey reversal confession through projection lawfare play. Very interesting. We'll see if it pays off. Now, for those of you who don't know, the charges were dismissed with prejudice by this judge. The judge's name is Dale Ho. And for those of you who don't know Dale Ho, he's a very young, good-looking guy. Maybe not that young. How young could he possibly be? Encryptus, how young is Dale Ho? I'm going with 45. Dale Ho, United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, the second most corrupt district in all of these United States of Americas. President Biden nominated Dale Ho to the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York on September 20th, 2021. When did they start investigating Eric Adams? It's right around that time, dude. Hold on. Just remember that date. Put a pin in it. We'll come back to it. This is Dale Ho, one of the nation's premier civil rights attorneys. Mr. Ho has spent his career fighting for our most critical constitutional rights and legal protections, and is eminently qualified to serve as a federal judge. An accomplished litigator, Mr. Ho has extensive experience at every level of the federal court system, including twice arguing before the Supreme Court, Southern District, which includes the boroughs of Manhattan, yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. When he was confirmed on June 13, Dale Ho became one of only 2 Asian American Pacific Islanders. My goodness, do they have to throw identity politics into everything in the Southern District of New York? Okay, fine. So,
77, by the way.
77?
Yes, sir.
So he's 2 years older than me. He looks younger than me. There, I said it. Hey, the bags under my eyes look a little better today. Maybe I slept. So Judge Ho dismissed the charges with prejudice. You will recall that Donald Trump didn't pardon Eric Adams. It was not a presidential reprieve. Trump merely came in and said, we're going to dismiss the charges without prejudice, meaning we can bring these charges back at a later date. We're going to wait until there's mayoral election, whatever. And we haven't looked at the evidence. This dismissal without prejudice is not a testament to the quality or lack thereof of the allegations. And we'll see what we'll reassess in 9 months, 10 months, whatever. This judge comes in, and if I can find the decision, which I know is here. Jugement. Voici le jugement. Voici le jugement, l'opinion de juge, l'honorable Dale Ho. That means this is the decision of the honorable judge. We're not going to read through the whole thing. I skimmed through it. I got a good AI summary of it from none other than Encryptus. And what I love about the AI summary, which we'll get to in a second, is it thinks like a Democrat, linear and lacking introspection. But bottom line, Dale Ho, the judge, comes in and is faced with a motion, which is Trump's motion to dismiss without prejudice. And the judge comes in and says, no, I can't grant this motion as drafted. It reeks of political pressure, political bias, corruption, if you want to call it that. I can only dismiss these charges with prejudice. So reading quickly, we'll only do the intro because that's all you need to know. February 14, Department of Justice filed a motion seeking to dismiss without prejudice the indictment against Eric Adams. DOJ's motion states that dismissal of this case is justified for several reasons, including continuing these proceedings would interfere with mayors' ability to govern, thereby threatening federal immigration initiative and policies. By the way, it's all about the illegal gang members and ICE. We'll get there. Critical feature of the DOJ's motion is that it seeks dismissal without prejudice, meaning they can refile within the statute of limitations. That is, the DOJ seeks to abandon its prosecution of Mayor Adams at this time while reserving the right to reinitiate the case in the future. Bear in mind, all the way throughout this, it's a Biden prosecution. They're angry. This judge is purporting to be angry at the fact that Trump can reinitiate the charges brought by Biden. Let it sink in and you'll understand exactly where the corruption is coming from. By the way, I agree with this case, just to throw this out right now, because the charges were bullshit from the get-go. That's why I agree with this decision. DOJ does not seek to end the case once and for all. Rather, it requests if granted that he would live under the specter of reindictment at essentially any time and for essentially any reason. Or how about the same reasons that Biden initiated the lawsuit in the first place? The court declines in its limited discretion to endorse that outcome. Instead, it dismisses with prejudice, meaning the government may not bring the charges in the future against Eric Adams. In light of the DOJ's rationales, dismissal of the case without prejudice would create an unavoidable perception that the mayor's freedom depends on his ability to carry out the immigration enforcement priorities of the administration, and that he might be more beholden to the demands of the federal government than to the wishes of his own constituents. Understand this, that if they get to hold these charges over his head, that he would somehow be more beholden to Trump than he would have been beholden to Biden or subservient to Biden for having brought the charges in the first place. And when did they bring these charges? Shortly after Eric Adams started complaining about immigration policies of the Biden administration. As for the immigration enforcement rationale, listen to this. To the extent that DOJ suggests that Mayor Adams is unable to assist with immigration enforcement while this case is ongoing, such an assertion is similarly unsubstantiated. Indeed, shortly after the DOJ made this decision to seek dismissal of the case, and while the indictment was still pending, the mayor announced that he would permit Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, to operate at the Rikers Island jail complex, an act that appears to be contrary to the New York City law. Do you know what that city law is? Sanctuary city bullshit. So this judge is basically, you can see it here, faulting Eric Adams for reversing on his sanctuary city bullshit to allow ICE to go to Rikers Island and deport illegal criminal aliens. It's unbelievable, the level of corruption, and they try to conceal their corruption in benevolence. In other words, the record does not show that this case has impaired Mayor Adams in his immigration enforcement efforts. Instead, it shows that the DOJ decided to seek dismissal of this case. The mayor took at least one new immigration-related action that pissed this judge off, apparently, consistent with the preferences of the new administration. Everything here smacks of a bargain. Dismissal of the indictment in exchange for immigration policy concessions. It's very interesting that this is now the second time where a judge, for partisan reasons, it was in Michael Flynn's case, where they refused to dismiss the case, and the judge said, no, I don't like the reasons for the dismissal here. This sounds like it might be partisan, so I'm going to refuse the dismissal. In this case, the judge refuses the dismissal without prejudice and orders it with prejudice. Encryptus, I can bring up the summary, right?
Absolutely. And I also supplemented the end of it with the additional research and context, as we talked about. So just scroll to the bottom, you'll see that.
The document does not contain any evidence or claim that President Biden personally initiated the charges. In fact, the investigation into Adams began in 2021, prior to any known policy disputes. It's an amazing thing how they commence an investigation that goes on for damn near 3 years and then only file charges on the eve of the election immediately or shortly after Eric Adams takes an adversarial position to Biden on immigration. Almost like it was a punishment. But this AI doesn't have that reality factored into its brain yet, much like every Democrat out there. The case was led by career prosecutors at the SDNY, the most corrupt, second most corrupt hellhole on earth. However, after the charges were filed, Adam made sudden policy changes favorable to the administration, raising concerns of coercive dynamics. It's very cool. AI is amazing, but I still think more amazing than any AI is the human brain, and my human brain in particular. I'm joking, but I'm not joking. So that's the Eric Adams. It is corruption. It's corruption through and through. And everything that judge says about his reasons for dismissing it, because he doesn't want President Trump using that indictment to coerce compliance or impose punishment on Eric Adams, is exactly why Biden brought those charges when he did. So you investigate anybody, you can find a crime on anybody. Investigated for 3 years, brought those charges on the eve of the trial, on the eve of the election, as either a punitive measure or maybe so they could hold it over the head of Eric Adams after the election because they were expecting to win. It's corruption all the way through, people.